Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this particular video, I'm going to be talking about the full moon in Capricorn on the 21st of July, and that happens at 11, so let me check that out, 11:18 British summertime, 10:18 UTC, so you can make the adjustments where you are, according to where you are in the world. And the actual degree in minute of the moon is 29 Capricorn and 9 minutes. And we'll come on to why that's so significant in a moment. Now, before I get into it, I just want to thank all of you for answering my question on my last video, the Ides of July. I asked you all what you preferred and debated whether I should start a new channel devoted to sun sign astrology, or whether we could manage it all under the umbrella of this channel. And overwhelmingly, you came back and said, just stay with this one channel. And we love all the mundane global stuff, and we like the sun sign stuff as well. So technically, this video is geared towards those of you who love the sun sign interpretations. And I'm going to be going through this particular full moon sign by sign after I've done my overview at the beginning. But especially with this particular video, it's at such an important period of the year. And that's why I've said, as a subheading really, we stand at a crossroads. And I mean that globally, politically, so many things going on in the world, and we need to address that every bit as much as we need to think about this full moon and the aspects that are surrounding it as our own personal crossroads, which it will be. So a couple of ways to really look at this. Now, one of the reasons why this is such a powerful full moon is that it is up close and personal to Pluto. Pluto is at 0 degrees of Aquarius, few little minutes in, and of course the moon in Capricorn is at 29, so we're within a degree, so they're very close. And a couple of days after this full moon, the sun is exactly opposed to that, to Pluto. So, full moon is the sun opposition the moon. Every month we get one of those, but this is particularly important because of Pluto's proximity to the moon. Also, I think we should mention that there was another full moon in Capricorn on the 22nd of June. I did a video on that. And although it had its implications globally and individually, it's this one that really packs a powerful punch. And I really sort of want to go through that before I get into it personally. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about is the degree that this moon is on, and the sun. The sun is at 29 degrees, 9 minutes of Cancer, and the moon is at 29 degrees, 9 minutes of Capricorn. We also have Neptune at the moment at 29 degrees, 50 minutes of Pisces. So the 29th degree of a sign is considered not just a critical degree, but an anaretic degree. And every time I say that word, I think it sounds like something you might take for a health condition. Oh, I'm taking anoretics at the moment. But it is the name we give this 29th degree. And it often represents, or it does represent, a crisis point. Now, before you get panicky about having something at 29 degrees in your chart, what we mean about crisis point are two ways of looking at this. Is the established way of thinking that 29th degree of a sign is really right at the very end of the sign. So it has the weight of experience in it, but it's just about to teeter over into the very next sign. And as you know, if you study astrology, every sign, one sign, the next sign, the sign after that, they're completely different. They're completely different entities, different properties, different elements, different quadruplicities. So you can imagine the second way of looking at the 29th degree and why it's such a critical degree is the idea that you yourself might be standing at the edge of a cliff. So you've got the land behind you that you've traversed. In front of you is a steep drop, and you don't know what you will meet when you get there, but it's a time to test whether you have wings. Do those wings work? Because it's a time to flap your wings, hence the idea too that we stand at a crossroads. There are other critical degrees, and they come in different signs. And although I can pretty well remember them, I'm going to make sure I give you the right ones. So if you have planets at 0 degrees of the cardinals, 13 degrees of the cardinals, 26 degrees of the cardinals, those are critical degrees. If you have planets in the fixed signs, 8 degrees, 9 degrees, or 21 to 22 degrees of the fixed signs. And as soon as I say that, I remember this is King Charles's degree, 22 degrees of Scorpio. And for the mutables, it's 4 degrees and 17 degrees. And a planet that falls on one of those degrees, one of those critical degrees, is certainly emphasized in your chart. It's going to be a planet that gains importance, and it's going to be important as you go through life. It doesn't mean that if you've got something on those critical degrees, you have a life in crisis. No, it doesn't mean that. Because it's important, if you like, and important to your development, evolution, and how things evolve in your life. But I certainly think this full moon at 29 degrees of Capricorn is or suggests that we are at a crisis point. And as I mentioned just a little minute ago, we also have Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces. So there's a lot going on these kind of degrees. And when I think of the current period of time, and of course, my last video, the Ides of July, was all about the election, the English election, the Great Britain election, the United Kingdom election, let's get those right. France goes to the polls, and we're also looking at the run-up to the American election and how these influences in this early to mid-July period are really having a huge effect on the future of countries. And if I come back to Macron for the moment and for France, as I'm recording this, it's Sunday, the 7th of July. So, in fact, France is going to the polls right now for the second time. And it's on a critical point, really, because the National Rally, who are far right, populist kind of group, behind which Marine Le Pen stands, has most of the votes, but equally there we've got a group of parties from the left who have banded together. And Mr. Macron, President Macron, of course, is a centrist, and he's going to stay president, although he may not, but technically he could stay as president right through until 2027, which he won't, I believe. But anyway, he will for the time being. So France is going to be thrust into quite a lot of turmoil. And what happens in France doesn't stay in France. It's one of the leading members of the European Union. It's going to have ricochet through the European Union. And we're already seeing in the Union the idea that the popularism is gaining traction. We've got Hungary, Finland, Italy, the Netherlands, Croatia, Slovakia, what a lot of countries heading in that direction. And of course, when you think about it in the UK, what Brexit was all about was about a strong nationalistic movement. But interestingly, of course, at this time, at this really turbulent time, instead of underpinning the trend for the right, as it were, we've just elected here in Britain a Labour left government in. Still a strong voice coming from the right, but that's another story. So what happens in France doesn't stay in France. And really, it's the same. Well, you may think, well, that just affects Europe, but it doesn't, because this also affects America, the rest of the West as well. So this really is a critical time, and we will see all this unfold over the months as we go by. So this 29 degrees, this anorectic critical degree, that we have Neptune at 29 degrees, that we have Pluto hovering around this 29 degrees. They're not stagnant, they're moving a little bit forward, a little bit back all the time, but nevertheless, they're hovering around that degree. This is one of the reasons that, or what's coinciding, if you like, what's presiding over the increase of fear and trepidation, uncertainty, the sense that we don't know where we're going, we don't know who's in charge, why are certain things happening, why do we feel so fearful and anxious about the future? Well, a lot of that does have to do with where these planets are at 29 degrees. And what is so interesting, if we take a look at Macron's chart, for instance, where is his Sun and his Mercury, but at 29 degrees of Sagittarius. So in fact, Neptune is squaring his Sun-Mercury conjunction. And of course, he called this snap election on impulse almost. His motivation was the country wants he saw the direction of travel for the country, and he thought, right, okay, well, you want a far-right government, well, let me give you one. This is what you want. But of course, that's really, really backfired. And instead of generating a lot of fear in the French people about a far right, they've gone, oh, right, okay, well, let's let's vote in our droves for it, or at least let's vote for change. So we can see that happening. And when we look at France, when we look at France's horoscope, and let's take a look at that for a little minute, we can see here in France that we have the Chiron at 28 degrees of Libra. So this full moon is squaring Chiron, and of course that 29 degrees, it means that also we've got Neptune and Pluto playing into Chiron. And as in natal astrology, Chiron representing this this thing we can never fix. So just loosely, it's a lot more than that, but let's just go with the idea of something we cannot fix. The idea that we've got this pressure on Chiron right now is showing that all this confusion, all this turmoil, all this desire for change is also, something that isn't fixable. It doesn't matter whether you get rid of Macron. It doesn't matter, how you move the political pawns around the chessboard. It's amounting to something that is, in the short term at least, while it's focusing on Chiron, impossible to fix. And I thought you might also be interested in the European Union, because this both the UK election and the French election are going to have an effect on Europe as a whole as well. And I thought you might like to look at the charts for the European Union. Now, I say charts because I float between these two ideas, one of them being the original treaty, and let me put that one up. And this is based on the Treaty of Rome, which was signed in March of 1957, but it came into effect on the 1st of January 1958. And I think what you'll notice when you look at this chart is that you can see Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces is not only on the descendant, it opposes the ascendant, but also it's exactly squaring the MCIC axis. So we have Neptune involved in the angles of this chart. And the angles of any chart are the most important. They're the strut of the wheel. There's what makes an individual or a country or whatever it is, the chart you're looking at. The angles of the chart are what really make it. These are the things that tend to be in focus when great things, important things happen to this country. So you can see in a way, when we look at the European Union, we can see that Neptune's influence hovering around its descendant is not only eroding those partnerships, and everyone in the European Union, all 27 countries, are working in partnership. You can see this gradual dissolution of that membership, and we can sort of see this change of thrust, if you like, towards popularism is in fact changing the nature of the European Union, democracies versus this populist movement. So it's at this point that we're seeing this confusion and uncertainty about, what will eventually work out. I'm actually not so fearful that this is the beginning of the end of the disbanding of the European Union. I think it's a lot stronger than that, and it's very necessary. But I am seeing a lot of division, and there's a lot of erosion of those, that sense of brotherhood that we might say is part of the European Union. But there is another chart for the European Union, and that is based on the Maastricht Treaty. And that came into being on the 1st of November, 1993. And if you look at this chart, it isn't so much the Neptune factor that's in play, but really the Uranus factor. And at this point in time, 15th of July, that Mars-Uranus conjunction, which I'll talk about just a little bit more in a minute, is on the moon of the Maastricht Treaty European Union chart. And not only that, there is a fixed T-square in there, the moon opposition Mars in Scorpio, squaring Saturn. So this Mars-Uranus conjunction is triggering that fixed T-square. And if you want to look at how effective this chart is, and it is, they're both effective, the one I just showed you and this one too. But when Putin invaded Ukraine, it did so on the first Saturn return of this chart for the European Union. Well, it was a few weeks afterwards, but near enough to say it had come of age, and my goodness, was it now facing one of its biggest challenges. So the effects of the French election are clearly shown here. As I said, I'm recording this on the 7th of July, the day the French go to the polls, so I don't know the precise results, but it is likely to be, as I said a few minutes ago. So this is going to send reverberations right through Europe, and it's going to give a lot of heart to that far-right movement, but it's also going to give pause for thought for all those who are not of that mind. So in the week that this full moon takes place, the full moon conjunct Pluto, it kicks off with this Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. And I intend to upload this video on the weekend, so this will go up on the 13th. So we're still before it all starts to unravel during that week. And I've spent a long time talking about this on my previous video, so I don't want to spend a lot more time talking about it. But certainly the fact that the Republicans are holding their convention at this time, it begins on the 15th, shows that this trend for upsets, its trend for reversals of fortune, this is going to be alive and well at that particular convention. And certainly there will be a lot of very fiercely fought talking points, and we have to wait to see how that pans out. But if you remember in my last video, we looked at Donald Trump's chart, and we could see that Mars-Uranus conjunction was on his midheaven. So we know that at this point in time, regardless of how it looks, as though, you know, with the recent developments in the Biden camp and the debate that was a disaster for President Biden and for the Democrats, it looks as though Mr. Trump is riding high. But the astrology tells us different. The astrology tells us that he is under threat, and we'll just see how much that threat manifests in the week of the 15th of July. But also this full moon, and we're going to look at the full moon chart in a moment. The full moon at 29 degrees, 9 minutes of Capricorn at Cancer being where the sun is. This is connecting to Mr. Trump's ascendant. His ascendant is at 29 degrees of Leo. So it may not be on his ascendant, but what it's doing is picking it up. So we have 29 degrees, which turns out to be a quincunx or an inconjunct as far as the moon is concerned. And this puts pressure on top of the Mars-Uranus conjunction on Mr. Trump at this particular time. Not only that, at this point in time, the Sun opposition Pluto, the full moon, we have Mercury exactly squaring Uranus. And in fact, that does fall directly on Mr. Trump's Mars. So he's right in there. He is under attack. And I think, you know, it would be advisable for Mr. Trump to really beef up his security at this time, to hunker down, to not be, you know, in the center of a storm, so to speak. Because really, if you had just a simple few words to say about this setup with the full moon in connection with Mr. Trump's chart, you'd say he's under attack. He's coming under attack. So without further ado, let us get into this full moon chart and see what else is going on at this time. I've set it for Washington, given that the center of everything is going to be Washington and America at this time. All the sort of signs of tumult and upheaval are really pretty well focused on the United States. And we can see here at the time of the full moon, actually, we've got the full moon right flanking, it's rising. The sun is rising, the moon is setting, and there we have Pluto right on the descendant. And here you can also see, because I've indicated it, we've got Mercury squaring Uranus, and this happens pretty well at the same time as the full moon. A few days earlier, Mars conjoined Uranus, although in this chart, we can see that Mars is headed into Gemini. And I think what's good about Mars in Gemini is the idea that it is about debate and discussion, and ferocious and spirited discussion at the best of times. And so that's a general kind of trend. Interestingly enough, the United States has Sagittarius rising, Mars is setting, so Mars is on its way to move through the 7th house. And of course, that means arguments as well, probably with its partners, which may be other countries, and generally a kind of unsettled picture for the United States. As we go forward here, we can see literally the next day, the moon opposes Uranus. So this brings out that Mars-Uranus effect, and it makes it emotional. It makes it much more kind of addressed to individuals. We're going to feel the effects of that Mars-Uranus conjunction more so almost on the Tuesday. And I'm going to take you through this sign by sign, so we won't get into that immediately. But I think if you are feeling at the moment very unstable and you are worried and concerned about what's going on, it's probably going to be at a maximum just before the full moon, and around the time of the full moon, it will settle down thereafter. Here we also see in this chart that the sun at 29 degrees of Cancer is going to move into Leo the very next day. And on the day after that, we have that exact Sun-Pluto opposition. So I think certainly if you've got planets and points around 29 degrees of any sign, or you've got planets and points at 0 degrees of any sign, but particularly the fixed signs, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, and Scorpio, cardinal signs, Cancer, Capricorn, Aries, or Libra, then in particular, this idea of standing at a crossroads is very, very real. Just before I get into the astrology sign by sign, I just want to make a point for those of you who are new to my channel. I do take this from both the perspective of the sun sign and also the rising sign. If you know your rising sign and you know the degree of your ascendant, then head to the interpretation for that. But also do watch your sun sign, because when I talk about sun signs and I do things from a solar perspective, I take into account the character, if you like, of that sign, and from the perspective of that sign, how things are likely to be experienced. And that's all important. It isn't just about, this general sun sign. It's about how you view, experience, what trends will be around from your perspective. And the sun really is not only the center of our solar system, but it is your personal center. It is your core in a way. It is, your core personality. So there's every reason to look at it from a sun sign perspective. But again, if you know your ascendant, then have a look at from the ascendant point. So let's go. We're going to start with Capricorn, because of course this full moon is in Capricorn. So as we think about full moons being all about closure and completion, we get an opportunity to do this every month on a full moon, but certainly when the full moon is in your sun sign or in your ascending sign, then that idea of closure and completion becomes even more effective, more important, more obvious, more noticeable. Full moons are a time of reflection. So this full moon is a great time to consider things that have happened, especially the things that have happened recently, to process them, and thereafter to regroup from them. Now, the moon will be in your own sign, the sun in your opposite sign, and we're looking at the axis of relationships from a 1st, 7th position. So relationships may well come into this idea of standing at a crossroads. Are you ready to take the plunge into a relationship? And that can mean, getting into a contract with a company, every bit as much as it means deciding to move in with someone, or to marry someone, or to make your relationship more profound, more legal, if you like, all those things that takes it out into the world, makes it official. But of course, a full moon is also about separation. And this can also be a time of endings for relationships, whether you are preparing to leave a company, or breaking up a business partnership, or you are heading out of a romantic relationship or a marriage. Now, of course, we've got these other influences around at this point in time. We've got Mercury squaring Uranus. We just had a Mars-Uranus conjunction. So the chances are that this isn't going to be something you've had a long time to think about. It's likely to be sudden. So that the events of the time are going to play into the decisions you make about a relationship, or it's going to be the actions of someone else to you that brings about a change in that relationship. The fact that the moon is so close to Pluto is also part of this kind of slow process, if you like, of a core change. Pluto, the principle of transformation, the principle of elimination, the principle of reformation. Things have to change under Pluto. The land gets reformed, your personal landscape, relationship landscapes, things that have been in place for a long time get reformed, eliminated, and in the space where something has gone, something new will fill it. That's the way we look at the whole idea of Pluto's transformational properties. Now, although I've talked quite a lot about relationships to you with this full moon conjunct Pluto, it can relate to other areas of life, of course, depending on your natal chart as well. But the principle is about saying, I've come to the end of the road here. I'm at a crossroads. Which way do I go? Do I go right? Do I go left? Or do I go straight on? And whether this is actually at the time of the full moon itself on the 21st, or whether it's slightly before it, during the week of the 15th, which has all those Uranian influences in it, or whether it's for the following 2 weeks, which is the lunar cycle, the fading of that full moon. So that is the time period in which decisions need to be made about which way you are going to go forward. And because of the nature of Uranus that's in the mix, you won't have a lot of time to think about it. And sometimes that's a good thing, because going on one's instincts, especially as a Capricorn, and you are a very measured, thoughtful, strategic kind of sign, always wanting to do the thing that's best and looking at the outcome before you take that step. But you may not have any choice. You just have to go for it. And there is a certain element of fate working at this time, and maybe that needs to be a strengthening factor rather than something that you feel is weakening. So lives will change on this full moon for you, Capricorn. And, whatever comes up in the way of, things you didn't expect, or feelings that well up inside you and say, you know what, this has got to happen. It's going to change a lot more than you think at the time you make this decision or the time of these events. So if we come now to Aquarius, and although technically when we think about where this full moon is, it's on the axis of the 6th house the sun is in, the 12th house that the moon is in, it's within a hair of your sign, and the moon is drawn into Pluto, which is very much in your sign. And especially if you have a birthday around about the 19th of January, 19th, 20th, 21st of January, this full moon is going to be much more to the forefront of your life. Things are going to be happening in a way that describes what I'm talking about, standing at a crossroads, your decisions to make. Do you go right? Do you go left? Do you go forward? But it's also part of a much bigger cycle, a 2 to 3 to 4 year cycle, while Pluto is going over these degree areas, in which so much of your life will be changed. Some things will completely go, other things will be transformed. In some cases, you'll be bringing elements of your past, excuse me, into the present, because you'll be kind of reinventing them. And that's such an important part of the Pluto process, is that even if something is eliminated, so it's gone, and you've got a blank space to fill, because Pluto is about regeneration, there is a sense here that elements of a job, elements of relationships, elements of your past can now be brought into the present and recycled, reinvented in some way. And that is a way to think about what's going on at the moment. Even if something appears to go from your life immediately at this point, it isn't completely gone in a funny kind of way, because it's leaving traces of itself. And by picking up those traces and weaving them into what you do next, what's going to come next, that's part of the Pluto process, and it's the right part of the Pluto process. Now, sometimes, Aquarius, I think you can be a little detached from your feelings. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have them. You have strong feelings, powerful emotions, but you'd rather detach yourself from them so that you can see more clearly. The thing about Pluto is that it's overwhelming, And really, you do have to get into your feelings. And sometimes if we suppress our feelings or we try to stand outside them, we face more trouble further down the line. They come back and hit us. So it's quite important to acknowledge how you feel, to go through those feelings, process them, really feel them in every part of your being, because it's like a washing machine. You're going through this cycle in order to get the clothes clean. And it's better you do this. Having said that, there is also a necessity to really see that some elements of your life are no longer necessary. And maybe too, we see this focused in relationships, that there are some relationships in your life that are toxic and they're actually preventing you from being who you truly are and what your true path is. And in a funny kind of way, even if we look at this from the 6th, 12th axis, so we're looking at the whole aspect of work and service to others, life purpose, health of mind, body, and spirit, which would also be in this full moon, it's still that idea that we are using our experience and we are going to be able to take it forward, albeit in a new way. So if a job goes, if something happens health-wise to you, or you have an experience that shatters your spiritual framework, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, there are elements, traces of that, which can be rewoven into the new fabric of your life that's coming forward. So let's now move on to Pisces. And for you Pisces, this full moon is flanking what I call the axis of creativity and collaboration. We're at the end of a gestation period. And I love that idea. I mean, we tend to think of gestation, don't we, in terms of babies. You know, they take 9 months to go from first spark of life into a fully mobile, living, tiny person. So it may be that that is appropriate for you right now. Maybe either you or a member of your family is about to give birth, or a baby is to be born, and this is the announcement of it. So we're looking at gestation in one form or another. But of course, a lot of other things take a gestation period. If you've got a project, especially a creative project, it takes a while to come into being. You have to work at it, plan it, process it, and then it's ready. It's ready. It's going to happen. So there's that in here too. But because we have Pluto in the mix, it means the impact of this creative project, this collaboration, this love affair, even this collaboration between you and another person, it's going to have a much more profound effect on your life than you think it will at this particular point. And again, let's remember, all right, the full moon is on the 21st. We've got the Sun-Pluto opposition on the 23rd. We've got the full moon waning cycle right through until the 11th of August. And of course, previously we had the Mars-Uranus conjunction on the 15th of July. So although we've used as the center point for me to talk to you about this full moon conjunct Pluto, there's such a lot going on around it that the whole period that we're in at the moment is all about that idea of bringing something into being that has taken a long time to really come together. And of course, the idea of Pluto is maybe it's a hard labor, but what is delivered at the end is life-changing. Nevertheless, full moons are also about closure and completion. So it may be that something is ended, and I use the idea of a love affair, you know, you and another person. It can be that this love affair has done its time. It's not going to be able to go forward into a more serious, committed, long-term relationship. It is what it is. It's been a beautiful time together, but it's not that kind of relationship. So there is a coming into awareness of that factor, which is very painful, I have to say. And this typically happens after a 3-month period or a 6-month period or a 9-month period, actually, that suddenly the veil is lifted and you look at that other person and it doesn't feel quite the same. And of course, that's happening to the other person as well. You wonder where all that magic has gone. Who is this other person? You're not feeling the same about them. This is a crucial crossroads point for a love affair, or for anything where you suddenly feel, I don't feel the same about this anymore. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get it back. You're going to have to go forward. But it is possible in some cases, this idea that you've reached the end of a stage of a relationship or the stage of a project. So it still has a life in it, but it's got to be reformed, recycled, reinvented, let's put it that way, which is a good thing. So there's lots of options here, but we're still playing around this same kind of theme. And again, because we've got Mars Uranus at the beginning of the week, we've got Mercury Uranus on the day, we've got this idea that, wow, that's come out of thin air. Never expected that. But it is all meant to be, Pisces. Okay, Aries, and let's have a look at what this full moon means for you. Well, of course, if you're born at the very end of your sign, so you're a kind of 19th of April, 20th of April Aries, then this full moon is going to be hugely important to you. And of course, you have Pluto already squaring your sun, and the full moon, of course, squaring your sun conjunct Pluto. So when Pluto squares our sun, it's a slow period. It's a 3 to 4 year time line. And a lot happens in that. By the time you come to the end of it, and we'd be talking sort of about, not this time next year, more towards the end of next year, that process will be complete. And you will have changed. Because of the things that have happened to you, you will change. And it's good. We have to change. We can't stay the same. That's how we evolve. But it's tough. And this may be a very tough period for you. It may be that you feel you're losing something, that things are being taken away from you, that you're looking at your life and thinking, it's not what it used to be. I don't have the things that I need in my life. They're gone. Whether that's financially, whether it's relationship-wise, however it may present itself. But of course, there is life after loss. There is life after elimination, and it'll be a different life. And it is simply meant to be. So again, we get this crossroads for you at this time, really brought about not just by you and by your own feelings and thoughts and experiences, but the events themselves, what other people do, what happens in your life. You are brought to this crossroads. And although the impact of that is emotional, and you need to feel it, and you need to register it and express it, react to it, when it comes to deciding which way you're going to go from here, that needs a little bit more clarity. You need just that little bit more time. And I'm thinking about that word clarity, and I'm also thinking about those March Arians, those of you born especially around the 20th and the 21st of March. If you remember looking at that Neptune at 29 degrees, 50 minutes of Pisces, that's like within 10 minutes of Aries. So you're likely to feel confused, feeling losses, feeling that things are slipping between your fingers. So this is all playing into this particular point in time. Empower yourself, Aries. That means you make a decision. By making a decision, we are empowered. We empower ourselves. It's when we don't make a decision, it's when we're fraught with conflict about it, that we're weakened and disempowered or disenfranchised. So empower yourself, and within the next 2 weeks after this full moon, really make a decision. It may be related to a relationship, it may be related to your career. And we think about the technicality of the sun or the solar perspective. The moon is in the 10th house of career. The sun is at the base of your horoscope in the area of home and family. So this could be a family crisis, this could be a career crisis, or whatever it is, you ultimately make a decision as how you're going to react to it, what you're going to do about it. And in so doing, you should feel empowered. And I think that's really, really important, Aries, because Aries is a strong sign. It's a pioneering sign. And you like to lead, and you like to be in charge. And I think very often the Neptune factor, if you're an early March, if you're an early Aries in that March period, or with Pluto, if you're in the later period, it does feel as though you don't have power over situations, but you do. And I'm going to address that at the end as well in my conclusion. So very important, the events of this week are important to you, whether it's in regard to your standing in the world, whether something amazing happens and you're vaunted somewhere high, you've got a great job, or whether it's the reverse and you're knocked off your perch. This is all the process of transformation for you. And so to Taurus, or Taurus rising. Now here it's complex, isn't it always complex? If you are an early Taurian, which means you're born 20th, 21st, 22nd, even the 23rd of April, or you know you've got planets and points around 0 degrees of Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, and Aquarius. And here I think, you know, coming into mind, Joe Biden with his moon at 0 degrees of Taurus. We think of King Charles with his moon at 0 degrees of Taurus. And we just know the transformation that's going on at this time and has gone on during this time. And it is the same with you if you have planets and points at that 0 degrees. This is going to be a really crucial period for where you go from here. I've talked about we stand at a crossroads, and you most certainly stand at a crossroads. And not only that, as you can see from the chart that I've got here, you have Mercury 26 degrees of Leo, Uranus at 26 degrees of Taurus. So if you are born around about the 15th, 16th, 17th of May, then you've got the Uranus factor and that Mars-Uranus conjunction to deal with. So this, for you too, is a time of profound change, a lot of it unscheduled, unanticipated, and sometimes unwelcome. But on the other hand, out of it will come this new life, if you like, and it's meant to be. We have a strong element of fate working particularly with Pluto. But also when we think about eclipses, and there have been eclipses in recent years on this Taurus-Scorpio axis. So we're continuing to play a story that has been going on for a couple of years. And eventually, by the time we get to next year, end of next year, it will be completed. The journey will be completed. So it may be that this idea of a journey is very relevant to you because the full moon is technically on the 3rd, 9th axis. So we are looking at things to do with travel, communication, the acquisition of knowledge. So this full moon completes a journey. So maybe you've taken exams, or you're about to take exams, or you're about to get results from exams, and that will in fact define your future from here. Maybe you're taking a driving test, or maybe you've got some other test of your skills, and this will define where you go from here. It's also, in a way, this idea that before things move into the 10th house of reality, if you like, there has to be a period of reflection and retreat. And that may be very appropriate to you now or in the following 2 weeks. So that, yes, A decision will be made by other people or a decision made by you, and things will be different going forward, particularly with your career, but it could also be to do with home and family. Just because we've got Pluto on that axis, even though the moon itself is and the sun are coming at a third, ninth level. I think in many ways, Taurus, one of the things I notice about and working with my Taurian clients is that you like structure and you like to know where you are. And at the moment, with the way the cosmos is, so to speak, you can't chart your way forward. It depends on other people. It depends on what happens. That's an uncomfortable place to be. But I think if you can just accept it and know it's not forever and to roll with it as opposed to blocking it, you're going to find it easier, and you're going to see how these obstacles, these these setbacks, so to speak, are in fact stepping stones. Okay, Taurus, so let me move on to Gemini. And Gemini, here for you, we've got the full moon flanking the axis of self-worth, which of course brings in the idea of finances too. So the chances are that at this point, you are either dealing with a lot of financial expenditure, so you've got a lot going out and maybe not so much coming in. You've got to make some really big decisions, or you're receiving, there's something happening with a settlement or some kind of decision that other people are making, and out of that will come money. It's all about money. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll get what you want, Gemini, although it could. I think what we're looking at more is the effects of what you get or don't get are going to change the way you go forward from here. When we have a full moon on our financial axis, we need to look at our finances. We need to either sign up to new agreements, or we need to settle our debts. We need to have talks and discussions with our financial partners, whether they're banks and lending institutions and credit card companies, or whether they are our partners, our business partners, or our life partners. This is time to get it all out there, have a look at the state of play financially, and to make some decisions accordingly. And because Pluto is in the mix, those decisions will tend to be radical. You'll be cutting back, you'll be getting rid of alliances, you'll be doing without certain things, either because it's going to lighten the load and you're going to be able to focus more on things that are more worthy, invest in more worthy things. Let's use that good word, investment. But on the other hand, it may be a reality that you simply can't juggle all these financial balls anymore. You know, they've got to go, and you'll streamline and therefore enable yourself to go forward without this heavy financial burden that you've been carrying. I always call, or sometimes call, depends, you know, who I'm talking to and where I am in terms of the astrology, I call the 8th house the house of receivership. So in a way that encapsulates the idea of inheritances, settlements, but also we use the idea of going into receivership when we go bust. So there is that sense of receivership here, whether it is about inheritances, whether it is about settlements, whether it is about financial gifts we're receiving from others, or whether it is about possibly going into receivership. This is the nature of this very powerful full moon and its connection to Pluto. There's also the idea of our self-worth. And sometimes our self-worth is attached to how much money we have in the bank and what assets we have. We live in a house, you know, we've got a car, you know, we have this, that, and the other, which defines us. Of course, it never really defines us, because who we are is a matter of substance in ourselves. And maybe this is also part of that full moon story to you, the understanding that what you have financially, money-wise, asset-wise, really isn't as important as to the substance within yourself. And then that will play into relationships, because if people aren't giving you full value and treating you as you deserve, then this will mean changes in those relationships, the ending of certain relationships, because they are not affirmative, they're not affirming your value. A lot to think about. And I think, again, thinking about your Gemini, to slowly come at things, but you're not going to have a lot of time in regard to what's going on in your life at the moment. And on to Cancer. So Cancer, you are right in the center of things here, because the sun is in your sign. And of course, if it's your birthday, my goodness, you've got this full moon conjunct Pluto in your solar return chart. It's going to have an effect in different ways throughout the next year. So it is very, very important that you have this kind of image in front of you, that you are standing at a crossroads. And it means so many things. It means that great and good events can happen, and the decisions and the response that you have to those great and good events is going to change your life, go in a whole new direction, because of the Pluto factor that's involved in that as well. On the other hand, it may be that things happen that you weren't anticipating and you're not initially terribly pleased about them, but they have the same effect. They're going to change your life going forward. But whenever your birthday as a Cancerian, the second full moon that's involving your sign, the first one in June, very beginning, so around the 20th, 21st of June, 22nd. And now this second one, it's a kind of double whammy. So maybe in the month between the last one and this one, you've been doing a lot of things. It's amounted to a lot of tying up of loose ends, completing things, getting things organized, getting things in your own mind settled. Maybe you can relate to that. Well, certainly on this full moon, that process is still very much at the top of the list. The idea that what you're seeing in your life, what's happening in your life, is in fact closing a chapter of some description. You may be happy about that. It's welcome. You've done that chapter. You've got a lot out of it. And now you're ready to start something new. But if I know Cancerians like I know Cancerians, you're not very good at letting anything go. Your history is important to you, tradition, values. So when it comes to a full moon conjunct Pluto, at the same time as a Mercury-Uranus square, it's like, oh, things are unraveling too quickly for me. Things are happening, and I haven't got time to really make these adjustments, and I'm not sure I like the idea of what's going on right now. Now, given time, you might see things differently. But certainly with Pluto involved, with this full moon, something's got to go. You can't take everything, forward with you. We travel better when we travel lightly. And unpacking things at this time is a good idea. Now, we can do it literally, and we can clean out the closet and have space to fit more clothes or whatever's appropriate. And we can detox ourselves. We can, stop, eating, drinking, doing things that are bad for us, and refresh our systems, let it go. Let's, do that on a full moon conjunct Pluto. But I think also we are in the area of relationships, because if we're technically looking at the solar chart here, the sun is in your sign, the moon is in your opposite sign, and that's flanking the first seventh axis, which is the axis of relationships. So we're looking at either making a decision about a relationship. That means you're going forward in a new way. You've done whatever it is, you're refreshing your relationship, you're looking at where you've reached and thinking we can let that go and not do that. And then we have time and focus and energy for this, that, and the other. So you can see there is a new stage coming in for a relationship. On the other hand, it might really be that you have reached the end of the road with that relationship. It can be a business relationship, it can be a relationship with a company, or it can be a romantic relationship, a marriage. And it's likely that events around this time have focused your mind. It's the events that have happened that bring you to this point, or bring another person to this point. It isn't as though, without the events that happen at this time, you might have gone on in the same old way. But there's something about what's going on right now means I've got to do something now, or the other person has to do something now. There must be change. Things have got to be different. Maybe it's financially, because Mercury is in the area of finances. Maybe it's to do with a business collaboration or a creative endeavor, because that's where Uranus is. So that's playing into the idea that this is going to have to be radically changed. It's affecting relationships now. I know you're not very good at ending a relationship, but if you think it's for your survival, it might be the best thing. But having said that, for some of you, this isn't about ending a relationship. It's about forming one, getting married, signing on the dotted line, forming a company, whatever it may be. And Pluto is transforming your life and relationship life because of what you're going into. It can mean several things. As I said, we're at a crossroads here, all of us to some degree. And I know you're a reflective type, and you will think carefully about everything that's gone before. Have the confidence in the decisions you're making, and also the events that are happening that are meant to be. It's good to have new roads coming forward. And if old roads run out, they're meant to run out. And so to Leo, my goodness, Leo, the sun, of course, will enter your sign on the 23rd of July. So this full moon comes just before it. And you will be beginning the month or the period in which the sun is moving through Leo as one of the most important periods of your entire year, if not some considerable years. This is going to be a very eventful period for Leos in general, and it sort of kicks off at this time. And in fact, considering the Mars-Uranus conjunction of the 15th of July, the Mercury-Uranus square of the 21st of July, already you may be very much aware of things happening in your life that are really going to change the script in some major way. Of course, it's a good thing, even if at the time you don't enjoy the things that are happening because you haven't actually brought them in, that they're happening. It's circumstance. These events have unfolded, and now you have to change your plans accordingly. And as I said, you're on the threshold of a very, very important August. So, this isn't just, one thing. There's going to be a series of things, and all these things are going to make for a very different scenario than you had thought for yourself when you started out in 2024 on January the 1st. You probably didn't think things were going to turn out the way they have to this point, but there's yet more to come as we go through August. So technically the sun is in the 12th house, the moon is in the 6th house, so we're on that 6-12 axis, which means it has a lot to do with health, wealth, spirit, mental health. It has a lot to do with work and service, life purpose, all those things that are central to our existence. So it is a time when you may decide that you wish to go on a retreat, that you are feeling the need to get away from it all. And I would recommend it. This full moon would be a perfect time to not just to head to the hills, but to really consider time to be on your own, to really process things and to allow yourself to feel everything you feel, and so that you are ready to make decisions going forward. This is something I would recommend to you. But of course, it may also coincide with the end of a job, with the end of something that you've been doing, even the idea of the end of a treatment you may have been undergoing, or the end of a spiritual set of practices you may have been doing, because this is a very spiritual, life purposey, devotional kind of axis. And all of that could play into that sense that going forward now, you're going to go forward in a different way. However, Pluto, of course, is in your opposite sign. It's covering the area of relationships from a solar perspective, and the sun will be opposed to Uranus, opposed to Pluto, a couple of days after the full moon. So relationships come into this as well. So we're at a turning point for a relationship. It could be a business relationship, it can be a relationship with a company, it could be a relationship with a friend, even a family member, or it could be a relationship like a marriage or a partner, a life partner kind of relationship. So it may be that you're ready to transform this relationship into something much more than it was. So you're ready to marry, you're ready to nail your colors to the mast, all of that kind of thing. And this will change your life, because that's what happens when we commit to somebody or something. It's life-changing. So we're looking at it that way. But we could also look at it in the way that a relationship is at an end, so that what Pluto is doing is transforming your relationship life in a sense that, you know what, all stories come to an end at some point, and we need new stories. We need new things to come into our lives. We need to take a new path because our life is going in a different direction. All endings of relationships are hard. Even if we're happy basically about an end, it's still, we're leaving something behind, and it's hard, but this is in your best interests, Leo. And I think certainly if you are a July birthday, you have a birthday around about the 20th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, then this is a time of endings and in times of things going out of your life. Pluto is a long-term process, a 3 to 4 year period where there will be endings and beginnings of a profound nature, and this is one of them. And at the same time, we have Mercury and Uranus in there as well, which suggests there is something, even if you're in the process of transformation and in the process of an ending and a beginning, what happens with all these other influences is there's something suddenly going on. So there are elements to all of this that you weren't expecting. But Leo, take them in your stride, because they are taking you to a better place. It may take time, may not happen immediately, maybe you can't see it, but it is all purposeful, okay? So on to Virgo. Now, when you look at this chart, Virgo, you can see that there are, it seems as though most of the planets for you are taking place in above the horizon. And that is broadly true when we look at the pattern that's going on. And so this is really a time when you should be promoting your interests, you should be out in the world, and maybe things connected to your career and life direction are a priority. Look, you can see Jupiter up there. It's going to be there until next June. And there is a lot of growth and potential success in the mix. And so this is a period when a lot of those kind of building blocks of all of that are being put into place. But when we look at this full moon, we see that the axis both of collaboration and creativity is involved, as with the full moon itself. But when we think of the conjunction to Pluto, we're also looking at the 6th house and, by association, the 12th house. So we have a lot here to do with life purpose. We have a lot to do with the sense of service that you have in what you do as a job or how you are as a person. And it may also be, since this is the area of our life, our daily life in a way, how our life is constructed, the nuts and bolts of our lives. That the idea that this full moon conjunct Pluto, they're all in here, in the mix, is that what's happening at this time should be reflected in a change in how your life runs. a change in routine, a change in focus, a freeing up of time here, a freeing up of space there. That's in the mix. Every bit as much as it is the idea that you've reached the end of a gestation period, that there has been a period of time where something has been developing and it's ready, it's done. So it can either be done in the sense it's ready to be delivered, and I think we often think here with a gestation period, we think of babies taking 9 months in the womb before they're ready to be born. That's a very graphic expression, and that may be appropriate in your case, whether it's your baby coming into the world or whether it's a member of the families or a friend, or somehow the idea of birth is in the mix here. But of course, a gestation period can apply to the time it takes to put a project together, to develop something, and it can be a relationship, a love affair, for instance. The 5th house, 11th house is about people, it's about groups, and it's about, romance. That is also in the mix. So you could be watching me here, listening to me and thinking, I know exactly what you mean. I've been dating this person for a while, and suddenly I feel we've got to make a decision. Are we going forward, or is this it? So the conversation is upon you, and maybe the conversation comes about in a very sudden way. The same really with the delivery of something. It isn't just something you expect to go according to plan. It happens suddenly, unexpectedly. And the same way we look at things to do with your work, your service, how your life is constructed, that it may suddenly change in ways that you didn't expect. But if we look at Pluto as a long-term resident in your 6th house, and certainly at this point in time with its connection to the sun and the moon, there is this idea too that it is time to consider how you can really do something in your life that isn't about just earning money or just being a cog in the wheel, but actually doing something that affects other people's lives in a purposeful way. And that too is so much the idea of a full moon conjunct Pluto in the 6th house. That crossroads you come to is, what is my life about? Is my life purposeful? Do I feel what I do is valued by other people? So that's the crossroads you're at, and the question that you yourself must answer. So here we are, we come to Libra now, and Libra, this is the 2nd full moon in this area of, well, we say the axis is the axis of life direction, the sun in the 10th house of work, reputation, the material world, your place in the world, and the moon on this occasion in the 4th house of home, family, the roots of life, the foundation of the future. So maybe a month ago, around about June the 22nd and that full moon, there were things that were happening, either career-wise or to do with your home and family. And they already seem to be saying, there's the end of a chapter and a new chapter will come in after this. Well, this time we've got it with knobs on. This isn't just any old chapter ending. It's a huge chapter. And if you're born towards the end of your sign, so we're looking at October the 20th, 21st, round about that period of time, then it's really playing long and loud in your life. And Pluto, of course, is also affecting this birthday group as well. So even though technically Pluto moved into Aquarius, a fellow air sign, and therefore in harmony with Libra, because we're at the very, very end of Pluto in Capricorn, and therefore you've got a cardinal sign, so you've got this sense of tension with these signs, and therefore aggravation, and it's a little bit like friction. Friction can create sparks, can't it? And sometimes these are healthy, welcome sparks. They give energy, drive, and life to things. And sometimes they just flare up and you've got a burning situation on your hands. So that metaphor may be quite useful to look at in terms of where you are in your life as this full moon happens. And of course, if you're one of those birthdays that I've just mentioned, late October, then it's really going to be, upfront and personal in your life. This idea of the end of a chapter, and also this idea of reaching the crossroads. The more conscious we are about reaching a crossroads, reaching a decisive point in our lives, the more able we are to make a good decision. So there are two things to consider. And this is difficult because it's coming at a time, Mercury is square Uranus, Mars has been conjunct Uranus. So a lot of things are happening quite forcibly, unexpectedly, and they're putting time pressure, a sense that you've got to do something immediately. Often when we have to do things in the panic of the moment, we make poor decisions, which is why it's better we sleep on things. And although Librans can sometimes be accused of being indecisive, this isn't because you can't make a decision. It's because you want to make a decision that's going to work for everybody, that isn't going to cast you in a bad light, that, going forward isn't going to cause you some kind of trouble. And although we want to make that crossroads decision based on all the things that we need to weigh in the balance, because of the Uranian factor in the mix, the luxury of time may not be yours. But I want you to think of the fact that the issues that are coming up at the moment, even if the circumstances around them are unexpected and different, there has been an issue that's been around for a while and you've dodged it, or you've thought it might work itself out, or whatever you have. So really something has come about that needed to be addressed. Now you have no choice. You have to address it. Now, it may be that things are happening in a good way and you can really feel excited about, what's going forward and what necessitates you giving something up or letting it go or change. And you can embrace it because you can see it's going to be good. On the other hand, we so often don't see what's good when we've got Pluto in the mix and Uranus. And so I want to urge you to look for the nugget of gold in these situations that are happening to you at the moment, because there is good in them. And in as much as we see all this turmoil in the world and we think, oh, please settle down, we don't like the way the world looks right now. Honestly, it has to get like this before it can get smoother. And it is really the same with your life. So maybe there are family situations, maybe there are things to do with your job, maybe there are things to do with your future going forward, and you seem to be at a bit of a crossroads here. Good decisions can be made. Process it first on the feeling level. And once you've dealt with the feelings, you've looked at the history, you've looked at the opportunities that have come and gone, you're in a better place to make a decision. Do I go right? Do I go left? Do I go forward? And things will change accordingly. But yes, I know Pluto in the mix is making things a little bit more tumultuous. But sometimes we need that tumult because it sharpens our senses. And what's going on right now, if it does clear away some aspect of your existence, what wonderful things are going to fill that space. So now we come to Scorpio. So such a lot going on for you, Scorpio, because it isn't just this full moon conjunct Pluto, it's also the Uranus factor. You have Uranus in your 7th house, so there's a lot here to do with the formation and reformation, upsets, attractions, dynamic things going on in relationships generally, especially if you're born around that sort of mid-October period. And of course, in this run-up to the full moon, there's a Mars-Uranus conjunction in your 7th house, and there's a Mercury-Uranus square on the day. So all those Uranian factors, that sense of things happening in a way that they're totally unanticipated, whether those are feelings for someone that suddenly come up out of nowhere, where there are sudden attractions and sudden decisions made about who you're going forward with, or whether it's the other way around and we've got ruptures. So we've got ends of contracts, we've got ripping up of contracts, we've got ends of love affairs, ends of relationships. They're all potentially in the mix. And then we look at this full moon, which is on the third, ninth axis. And we think about the end of a journey here, because the third and ninth house are to do with journeys. They're to do with travel. They're to do with movement and motion. And it has a lot to do with the acquisition of knowledge too. So the end of a journey is a journey in knowledge and experience. So maybe you already agreeing with that. You can see it, touch it, feel it, and know it. On the other hand, you may say, haven't been anywhere, don't think anything in my life is a journey at the moment. Well, sometimes when things happen and life changes, then we realize we've been on a journey. But it's complicated because the moon is conjunct Pluto, and we've got Pluto on the cusp, just dodging around that fourth house area, which brings home and family to it, into the mix. So is this about a move from the home you're in? Are you already planning this? Are the removal vans already gathered and you're going? Is it that there is an opportunity coming about now or in the next few weeks, and that will involve a change of location? Perhaps a big change of location, not just down the road, but maybe to another state, another country, whatever it may be. So there's, a huge amount of movement here. Or is it what's going on in the family? Is something happening to a member of the family? Is a member of the family going to have a baby? Are members of the family about to divorce? Has something happened in the lives of family members that have turned their lives upside down, and accordingly you are affected as well? Or is it the opposite way around, and we've got career and your material world that are affected? And this is why this full moon is a little bit more complicated, because it is at the end of one sign, Pluto's in the other sign. So we've got these two areas of life together. But remember what I talked about in the sense of that 29th degree. You're standing on a cliff. In front of you is the unknown, the unfamiliar. It's time to find out if those wings of yours work. And I think that's very appropriate for you. Sometimes you have to take a leap of faith. You have to jump into the unknown and find out how your wings work. I'm sure they do work, incidentally. So yes, we've got so many things involved here. We've got other people, we've got relationships, one-on-one relationships, family relationships, work relationships, work. We've got a whole area, many areas of life that are affected here. And one way or another, what happens in one area of life affects other areas of life. A little bit like what happens in France doesn't stay in France, it affects everything. And it's the same way when I look at your chart. So be prepared to let go, Scorpio. Let it go. By letting go, you're lighter. And when we are lighter and travel lighter, we get further. So use these metaphors that I'm giving you, because they will help you make good decisions. And in those decisions that are made for you, that crossroads you've reached, you will be able to make the most and best use of those decisions, because there is a new life going forward. The end hasn't come. There is more to come, only it's in a different direction. So last but not least, we come to Sagittarius. So for you, Sagittarius, when we look at this full moon, it is on the second eighth axis. I love saying that. It sounds very technical, doesn't it? Second eighth. So this is the axis of self-worth, and self-worth applies in different ways. How much money you have in the bank, what are your assets, material assets, but more than that, who are you as a person? What is your value? How do others treat you? Are you being given full value? So either in the immediate time, the immediate future, time of the full moon, the week prior to that full moon, starting on the 15th of July, or in the subsequent 2 weeks of the waning cycle, there's a whole issue coming up about how much you're worth. Just say that simply, because it's either reflected in the way your boss treats you, or your employees treat you, your bank treats you. Do they acknowledge you're a person of value and you need to be treated accordingly? So this will lead to several different things. It may lead to the cancellation of a monetary agreement, whether that's with a bank or a lending institution. Could be the end of a mortgage, which would be wonderful. But it could also be the end of a contract, so that, you haven't been appreciated, and now it's time to find a place, a situation, people who do appreciate you. So even if right now you're listening to me and you've never really thought about yourself and how much value people place in you, what you're really dealing with is finding the money to do certain things, or finding the investment you need into certain things. And so it's all a matter of financial facts and figures. It isn't, I promise you. At the core of it is your own value, and getting that, understanding it, and really recognizing your full value is going to make a difference as to how these financial discussions pan out. You know how it is when we feel confident and good about ourselves, we form better agreements. I did talk to Gemini, your opposite sign, about the idea of receivership. And this is because the 8th house is involved as well. The sun is in the 8th house, the moon is in your 2nd house. And this is the area of receivership. And you had another full moon there in the June period. So already there are either expectations of an inheritance or a settlement, a legal settlement, whatever it may be, or an investment paying off. Maybe that's already in motion, but it may come about really when we think about this full moon coming up. But it's also about your finances in an overwhelming situation. Do you need to cut your losses? Are people not giving you enough money to live on? Is what you're dealing with financially too great for you and you just need to drop it? Those are decisions for you to make. I'm not going to recommend it, but I think what's happening at this time with Mercury, Uranus, Mars and Uranus coming into the mix is the idea that suddenly things happen, and that focuses the mind. That means, goodness, I'm going to have to make a decision about this financial fact or this material fact. But relationships come in here as well. And as I said, this is about your value. And if people aren't treating you as you deserve, whether that's a life partner, a business partner, an employer, or employees, it's time to say enough is enough. Remember, that crossroads you're at is your future going forward, and it needs to be a future full of value. Lot to think about, Sagittarius. So I've been through all 12 signs, different perspectives, and this whole thing about being at a crossroads is really important for us to realize that, even if we feel none of the events in our lives at the moment are showing us that, but we are. Globally, we're at a crossroads. A lot of the big decisions being taken by leaders and in politics are showing that, whether it's with Putin and Xi Jinping, whether it's with Biden, whether it's with, the whole of all of that. Elections are going on, and we stand at a crossroads because the decisions made by countries and leaders are going to affect us big time. And the same with ourselves. We need to make our decisions in consciousness. In other words, we don't need to fumble them and get there and say, oh, shall I do this? Shall I do that? It's more about recognizing the gravity of what we're doing and being consciously aware of the decision we're making. And as I said, everybody needs to do that. Leaders, nations, we do that. We go forward better, which actually leads me into my conclusion, which is really about fate, is everything set in stone? And when you think the planets and the alignments, they're all there. They are set in stone. This is where they will be in 100 years' time, in 500 years' time. They are consistent. They go on. Nothing changes. They suddenly don't, change the direction they're going in. Oh, I know, I can hear you saying they go retrograde and direct, but you get my drift. You know what I'm talking about. So we get that idea that if it's written in the stars, it must be, it must be right. And of course, this is where we have problems as astrologers and people looking in on astrology and saying, why didn't astrologers predict this? Why did they do that? We can't trust astrology. Whereas what we're looking at is a whole range of options. We're always working with symbols and possibilities. And not only is it the interpretation of what those alignments mean, which has a variety of interpretations, crucial to that are the decisions we make. If we make a decision on a certain day to go this way or that way, then that alters the trajectory of where we're going. Now, it may mean that with the very, very big picture of life, there are certain things that simply must come about. But I think within that, there are roots to that coming about. And that's dictated by the decisions we make at the time and the decisions our leaders make at the time. So there is variation. Hence my idea that the more conscious we are, the more consciously aware we are, the better the decisions we will be making. So that going forward, and everything that I've talked about on this video, where I've looked at what's going on in France, what's going on with America, and I've talked about in my Friday Bites the idea that Biden must go, and this is what it looks like astrologically, if not very shortly by the time we get to the convention, the Democratic convention. But there are decisions that can be made in the interim, which may not make that exactly come about, but the end result will be that. So back again, I come to us individuals. We can make decisions. They may not ultimately change our destiny completely, but they change aspects of it and the route towards that destiny. For instance, if it is our destiny to perhaps get an illness, then how we treat that illness, what we do as we are experiencing that illness may in fact extend our lives beyond what it could have been. So there are all those kind of possibilities that depend on us, our choice, our free will, and we should never forget that. If you're talking to people about astrology and they're saying, oh, that's a load of rubbish, they never get it right, they don't tell us when something is going to happen. Remember that this crucially important thing is that we are involved in the narrative of our lives, the narrative of humanity. We have a part to play. We have choice. And that comes in to the narrative, if you like, of the planetary alignments and the planetary cycles. So this has been a big video. And sometimes, when I've done a video, I think, oh, did I do it justice? Did I really get all my points across? I hope I did, because this is such an important time for all of us. And, whenever I put myself out here on these YouTube videos, it's there to help. So it's important to get things right, important to say things in the right way. So again, thank you for all those comments. They are so helpful. And they help my direction of travel. And if you're new to my channel, please press the subscribe button. It all helps. And I look forward to speaking to you, being here with you in a couple of weeks' time. Bye for now.